for folks to log in and to join us, and we'll get started. Hi, C. Thank you for that recommendation. First season was good. All right. I'm adding that to it. A Spanish show. All right. Emerson, have you seen High Seas?
No, I have not. I am.
Exactly.
It's funny because I'm more into watching moving art in Netflix, which makes you relax a little bit. So just pictures of beautiful places plus relaxing music. That's my go-to.
Digging it. All right. All right, folks, we will get started. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. Thank you to all the folks who've joined us, who are in attendance for this latest session of the ICSD Distance Learning 2.0 webinar series, where we've asked and engaged with some of the best educators in our school district around what they're doing in the midst of our school building closures to continue the learning and to innovate. This week we have some absolute superstars who are going to share with you what they've been thinking about, what's on their hearts and minds, and some innovations that have occurred in their learning spaces. If folks who on the call you've been on before, you please use the chat feature or the Q&A feature to ask a question or to share a comment or to share a resource with us all. But again, yeah, we will use that Q&A feature in the chat room to put questions in front of our panelists that you wish to have answered here this afternoon or whenever and wherever you're watching this session. So with that, again, we have some outstanding panelists this week. This has been a great series of conversations, and I will ask them to introduce themselves. And then we will start with Emerson. Emerson, please share who you are and what school you're from.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity. Emerson Kaiza. I'm from Ecuador, and I teach here at Boynton Middle School for grades 7 and 8 Spanish classes. And I graduated Ithaca High School.
All right, I just grabbed. Thank you. And speaking of Ithaca High School, Steve.
Yeah, I'm Steve Weisberg, and I teach math at Ithaca High School. Been here for about 27 years.
Thanks for joining us. Next on my screen now is Deb. Deb, please.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. I'm Deb Patak. I'm the principal at the Lehman Alternative Community School. This is my second year, and I am blessed to be a member of ICSD. Prior to coming to LACS, I was a principal in Baltimore, Maryland, and prior to that, a principal in the Madison, Wisconsin School District.
So fortunate that you've chosen to be with us, Deb. Thank you. And Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Brown. I'm Zach Lind, the Chief Information Officer for the Ithaca City School District. Prior to this role, which I've been in for about 4 years, I was a tech teacher for 1 year and then a social studies teacher for 8 years. And then I did some instructional technology work, and I've been with the district in multiple capacities for about 6 years. So happy to be here.
It's an honor to work with you, Zach, and it's an honor to work with all of you. Again, thank you for joining us this afternoon and sharing your wisdoms and your experiences with everyone. And I need you today. I mean, there's been a lot happening in our community and in our country this last week. And, yes, I do want to get to what we're doing to innovate in our school district, what we're doing to meet the needs of learners when it comes to blended learning, how we're planning to be different and better than ever when we reopen, hopefully in the fall. But I think it's important, particularly with the type of expertise and experiences on this call. I need your help. I think our community needs your help to process all that's happening. We've had some pretty egregious things happening in our country. And folks are, as I speak right now, are on the commons and downtown protesting and seeking justice. So as school leaders, as school community leaders, as folks who are engineering experiences for our young people to engage in challenging dialogue to create better systems and better communities, I'm looking to you to give us and give the folks who are tuning in today some thoughts about how you're processing this with your young people in classes and or with your staff in school. So anyone wish to share what you're thinking right now and what you've done over the last 24 hours, the last week, to help us process what's going on?
I can start, Dr. Brown, because I know that as we are on this webinar, my staff is engaging in a staff meeting. We had a pretty full agenda about closing out the year in virtual and distance learning. And it was just kind of a universal commitment that we would honor and respect this moment. One of the first things that we did was make sure that our staff of color were surrounded with love and reached out to let them know that we see them, we support them, and know that the reality that they're moving in, specifically my African American staff, is very, very different than the reality that I'm moving in. So we all did a staff read of an article about how fatiguing these times are and how this is affecting African American professionals and kind of the space that they need, the pain, the fear, the anger, and the outrage. And we're breaking out in our staff meeting right now into white affinity group, or what does action and allyship look like for white staff, and us creating a safe space for our, specifically our African American staff to just be and strategize how we can move through this and use this as an opportunity for real change. We've also reached out to all of our students who are African American just to say simply, we see you, we love you, we're here.
Thank you. I appreciate your approach to making sure the adults are doing well and having then the adults reach out to young people very intentionally to ask how they're doing. Thank you. Other thoughts, other folks doing some things with adults and or students today, last week?
Well, I'll jump in. I've been meeting with a lot of students today, and not big class meetings, but just one-on-one or in pairs. And a lot of that was scheduled anyhow because we had work to do. But this has been, coming up in those conversations. And the students have been really great. They brought it up and we talked about it. And, I think the important thing for everyone to understand is that we support them. We're all in this together. I think we have to acknowledge the anger and the frustration that are driving the protests. And, one of my students was talking about patience. Like he's tired of being told to be patient. And I think that's a valid emotion. And so we just talked about that, how, yeah, there's times when you wait for things to get fixed. And then there's times when you say, I can't wait anymore. Like something has to change now.
Thanks for sharing that thinking and what you're doing with young people right now. Emerson, I think you were about to jump in. Did you have something? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. Thank you for sharing that, Steve. And that I think one of the things that's come along distance learning for us in the middle school has been that students have advocated for themselves. In a way, a lot of the students taking languages have advocated for themselves by sharing their own voice and point of view, how they want to get things done. So we've opened our hearts and we've opened our mind to students that want to share the ways that they want to have their products done for the assignments, for instance. So I believe that the students' voices and choices that we're having in the classrooms, we're listening to them, we're reflecting on them, and it's we're accommodating to what's happening in the current moment. So we don't know what's happening at home. They might have one or two brothers that are taken care of, or parents are at work. So we understand that the times are tough. And I think by closing out the school year, we're going to have some conferences with our students. I think it'll be good to get to highlight some of the things they've done for distance learning and being able to hear their voices and what they have to say. beyond the schoolwork and how it's been going on at home for them. I think it's good to hear from each individual as well.
Yeah, I mean, we adding to the challenge here is the fact that we're having to do this in a digital environment. I mean, I'm looking at folks who are your best when you're in a space, a physical space with young people and connecting in that way. And to hear you talk about how you're reconnecting and helping them sort through these things in this digital space is fascinating for me. And then, and I look to you, Zach. You've been so important to our planning for how we've been able to deliver our instruction this last couple of months. But that didn't just happen over the last couple of months. You've been planning for this for years. Can you speak to what has been your approach to planning for the delivery of instruction up until this point, and now what you're doing to transition or do differently, and what you see us, maybe as you see us reopening and we're going into the fall, or some things you're thinking about as the leader of our technology initiative. What would you share with folks?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about a giant question. There's so many things that sort of went into to get where we are now. At the elementary level, for example, we just had the logistical hurdles of getting, 2,000 plus Chromebooks or so, maybe a little less, into the hands of our kiddos, and get them working and functioning without the chance to train everyone on how it works. So we've set up a family help desk for people to call, leave a message, we call them back. We're really working on, from the tech side, listening to you all talk about working with students on day-to-day makes me miss being in the classroom. But what we know is that we had to build a system to connect with everyone. So we have our family help desk up and running, and we're remoting into the Chromebooks of our students to help them with sign-in and login issues. We're really trying to work a lot on that side. So infrastructure-wise, a lot of it's planning to have the devices, having the devices ready to deploy, and then using the idea that trying to make paths to educational content as easy as possible. So trying to get folks logged in as efficiently as possible so there's less margin for error. And this leads us to some of the things that we're looking at in the future. As we look forward into next fall, I know our district and the state and the country is looking at how are we going to reopen our schools in the future. We have to be prepared for perhaps things like this occurring again. So we're looking at, do we need to increase the devices in terms of who we're deploying them to? We're looking at regionally, how do we make sure everyone's connected to the internet? That's a huge thing. We have a huge digital divide in our communities in a lot of different ways. And then we're also looking at how do we keep track of the learning that's going on with our students. At the secondary level, we're using Google Classroom, but we don't always know when folks are logging in, what they're doing. So we're looking at, are there better systems that we need to bring online to help keep track of student learning and engagement?
Thanks for sharing that district-wide perspective. It's very valuable for folks to hear. I would love to transition. So, Steve, you and Emerson are preparing for and been planning for delivering instruction since we've been closed, and also preparing for what it would look like into the fall. What can you share? Let's start with Steve. What has your planning been looking like the last couple of months?
Well, of course, in the beginning, we were kind of in crisis mode. So adjusting to this new way of teaching was a big part of it. But now that we're in a little more of routine, I've had an opportunity to reflect a lot more. And in a way, it's kind of amazing to me, the paradigm shift, because we've done education in pretty much the same way for so long. And if you think about it, we pretty much pivoted on a dime. In a matter of just a few days, we completely changed how we do things. And I mean, that kind of change is always painful. I think of it as being thrown into the swimming pool. But now we've learned how to swim. So regardless of how we got here, I think that there's a lot of really interesting things that have come out of it. So I'm kind of in a space right now where I'm thinking about all the things that are different and what's good about it, what's bad about it, how can we leverage some of the changes that we're seeing. I mean, for example, no Regents exams. That's been really liberating. We've also been working with sort of a time crunch in terms of getting through our curriculum. So it's making me realize how much of in a course like Algebra 1, how much of what we do is driven by state standards instead of by what we think is necessarily best for students. And it's been really liberating to be able to say, okay, we don't have those tests now. Let's just focus on what we think is useful for students and engaging for students, and to actually have the freedom to just think about curriculum that way. And then I think about asynchronous learning, and I know for my students that that's been really liberating. I think of my first period class and how they always walk in and they're sort of in shock from being up so early in the morning. And now they can access content whenever it's suitable for them, whenever they're ready for it. And that seems to make a huge difference also. So I'm still parsing things out, but I think I'm able to appreciate now that there's a lot of options that we have that we hadn't been considering that might be better for our students and better for our schools. And so I'm sort of looking forward to the summer just to have the opportunity to just sort of replay what we've done and think about what things can I carry forward now.
You just dropped two pretty big nuggets. The liberation from not having to worry about the Regents exam or state standards, and the schedule. And I would offer up the two things, quite frankly, that those are constructs that we have implemented. The focus on the state assessment, and our master schedule. Those are things that we create. So I'm going to come back to that at some point, because that's big, and we have an opportunity to truly be liberating and liberators for our young people if we just simply changed our mindsets as educators. Emerson, what would you share from a teacher perspective as far as how you're planning for now, how you've been planning and how you're planning right now and into the future?
How I've been planning. It's been, I think I'm going to take some of the same ideas that Steve has shared with us, because using Google Classroom for our assignments since we began teaching, I think it's been a helpful place for students to look at the resources we've curated for each one of them, along with the videos that will go along with the New York State standards that we try to, accomplish by the end of 8th grade when they get a high school credit for high school. So I think one of the things that it's been nice to see is that kids' adaptation to the live sessions has been great. So like Steve said, students don't have to wake up at 8 a.m. to watch the video. They might have chores to do at home. They might have little siblings to take care of. So we are looking for students to be able to watch the video later and being able to complete the assignments at their own pace. And that being said, for instances where students are, looking for specific details, we need to work one-on-one. Perhaps we have scheduled sessions for them where we can work with them, share with them the document. They share with us the document on the Meet. And once we record the session, we send it back to them for their future reference so they can get to see what's happening as well. This might seem like a very small grain of sand, but like trying to begin a class for the Spanish classes has been helpful to me by playing music to them. We play Spanish music, we play music from South America, music from the Caribbean, and until people start trickling in, people start listening to the words, and they go, oh, there is some French words in there. I had a Spanish 8 kid who knows French, and she's taking Spanish. She goes, oh, that's French, that's great. So we're trying to merge some cultures when trying to understand the language in a real life situation prior beginning a class session. And students have a chance to have a low anxiety filter when they walk into a class. And I think that's been, in some instances, liberating for the kids. So they're not stuck to things that we might do, challenging for them. In this case, we want students to be able to accomplish the work.
Thanks for sharing those very practical strategies, very closely responsive strategies. No, I appreciate that. Now, as a building leader, what have a sense of what your planning has been looking like? So what could you share, or what would you share about how your planning has looked and what you've been planning for?
I want to echo what Steve said about how in this time of crisis, teachers had to pivot on a dime and really rethink what teaching and learning looked like. And I and my other administrators consulted often about what platforms and what opportunities can we provide for teachers to assist them in pivoting on a dime. One of the things in those first few weeks that we were able to do is have professional learning communities come together and really do a deep dive into their course syllabi and really ask those critical questions that both Steve and Emerson raised about just what are the critical outcomes? What are the essential enduring understandings? If we have a limited amount of synchronous time, just what does getting to the end finish line look like from a skills standpoint and from a standard standpoint? And really synthesizing and boiling that down. I mean, luckily at LACS, we have the beautiful situation where we are exempt from the regents. And I think we learned so much about what portfolio completion and outcomes look like. So this crisis has allowed us to have a deeper conversation about what mastery looks like and how can we quantify it and what experiences can we provide for kids. The other thing that I found myself compelled to do as a leader is to really work as a thought partner with staff about what is the value of synchronous learning and how can we leverage asynchronous time in a way that's equitable for all kids. And Emerson, you were talking about some students. We've had a really new view into our students' lives by asking the question, can you show up for a synchronous session? Why might you be off camera? And not make assumptions about that. We have learned more about our students during this time of pandemic that we can now use to inform their ability to learn, their ability to digest information. We created opportunities for cross-curricular consultation and also consultation between support staff and teaching staff in a new, rich, and robust way. So we partnered and realized how important, specifically at the middle school level, giving students consistency and a schedule, how important that was going to be. And then we don't start any kind of synchronous learning until 10. And we gave teachers and students the flexibility, specifically teachers with young children at home. So they're parenting, they're homeschooling, and they're teaching. So it really kind of exploded that paradigm too, of what we expect from teachers and what teachers are able to do during this time. And every teacher reports at the end of each week to a team of support service staff, kids that were not able to come to a synchronous session, or kids that seemed like they weren't engaging. And each one of those kids got a support staff point person, and that point person is working in partnership. We have also had some amazing teacher aides and teacher assistants who are in the classroom teaching alongside and supporting students and staff. So there have been some really beautiful and dynamic opportunities that we're really learning from and thinking about how to leverage those for next year.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, folks, we have a bunch of folks who've tuned in, community members, teachers, colleagues from the region, board members. I see our board president, Rob Ainsley's on. It would be great if you share a question or a comment or a resource in the chat room or the Q&A section. You have some amazing, talented people here. So if you have a question you wish for me to put in front of them, please share that question. I could talk to y'all all day, but I want to share the space a little bit. Now, I've been wishing to ask you. You've answered it in some ways, but I'm going to push you to give me even more specific strategies. You know, let's say Governor Cuomo comes out and flips a switch, and there's a miracle, and we can all go back the first week in September back to quote unquote normal. Everyone's coming back into the building. If that was what we intend to do, you can do whatever you want to do, school district. What are some practices and some things that you've tried over the last couple of months, or some things you're thinking about right now that you would want to make sure are part of your practices, and you would want your colleagues to know and be part of their practices as well? Some of you shared some examples of that, but if you can give us even more of those, that's something that folks, I am eager to hear from you. We can start with anyone who wishes to jump in with that one. Who has that burning thing that you want everyone to do if the governor comes out and says we can go back tomorrow?
I'll jump in. Yeah. So, you know, I was thinking about that very thought. Like, if there was a button you could push to put everything back to normal, And part of me was hesitating, thinking, I'm not certain I would push that button. And I don't want to discount the pain that this has caused a lot of people or the tragedy, but in terms of having broken the paradigm and having an opportunity now to rethink everything, I just think that that's so valuable. For myself, one thing I've realized is that I love my interactions with students. That's the most important part for me. So I feel like moving forward, the time that I have with students, I really want to maximize that opportunity to interact. And I guess what I've learned is that, first of all, my actual lessons, even though I enjoy, pontificating and having students listen to what I have to share, I realize that we don't need to be in the room for that to happen. I can make a video and share that, and they can learn that way, and that way we can maximize our time together. Another thing I've learned, I was right in the middle of a project with some of my students right when school. And it was interesting to me that there are a lot of sort of like bumps in the road transitioning, but that project went ahead completely smoothly. And I realized that those sorts of projects with students where they can work on them outside of the classroom and talk to each other and talk to me, those are actually very adaptable and very sort of robust. They can happen in any kind of environment. So that was useful learning for me, I would say. And steadily, I've been trying to incorporate more of that, but I want to keep doing that. The more I can do that gives students opportunities to sort of learn on their own. And Emerson was mentioning this, and kind of choose how they want to apply what they are learning. The more I can do that, I think sort of the more robust our system is. And the more opportunities students have to sort of express themselves and bring their world into what we're doing.
That was inspiring to hear you speak in this way, Steve, after your experiences and time here and your credibility here is inspiring. So thank you for sharing. Something else. Emerson?
Yeah. Thanks, Steve, for sharing. I think the one thing that has always been a key part for our world languages program is that the communication that exists between our department, the building, and across the buildings from the district that teaches world languages. It's been key to see what's working, what is not working, how are we reflecting and implementing the new strategies like Flipgrid, for instance, for our 8th graders. It used to be the case that in classroom, it was done in groups or small groups or pairs, speaking assessments. And, it's heartbreaking to not have the students right in front of us and being able to provide the feedback that's appropriate for them. It's not like they're going to listen to me talk, I don't know, the 30 minutes, but we want to make sure that we provide the feedback that, that gives them the leverage to be proficient in the New York State language standards. And I think with that being said, I do want to continue the communication and being able to share the resources with our department that we've been having. And it's a key point to point out that based on that, we were able to continue to support students in their own ways. For instance, when we do speaking assessments now, we do them using Flipgrids. Students who do need the feedback, students who need one-to-one help will provide individual feedback through this portal. And it's something that I want to take beyond distance learning. I do want to push it forward, and when if we return to school again, we are able to do it in groups perhaps. Of course, in class, I've used Seesaw to record our computer science projects that we've done with the kids with BBots. Prior March 13th, we just finished our BBots project with the 7th graders, and they were able to record them and put them up on Seesaw. And then, distance learning happened. The adaptability that the students had to be able to transition to do assignments online and being able to to complete their speaking assessments through Flipgrid was something that I have to say, it's through the circumstances that we're going through, students are doing a good job at keeping up with that.
Thank you.
Something I would,
Go ahead, Zach.
yeah, so yeah, just one big thing that, and you say Flipgrid and Seesaw and all these different tools, one just big takeaway that I would really urge to think about is when we have our students doing work and they're presenting some sort of material, like we have the ability for our students to record their responses in so many different mediums now that we don't, like previously we were constricted to print because it's all we had, right? We had paper and pencil and then your physical classroom space. That's expanded greatly now. So I think when we go back, it'd be disappointing to not keep in mind all the ways we can allow our students to respond in ways that can meet their learning style. So allow your students to create a video, allow them to emulate the communication tools that we're using in social media and that are the fabric of our society today. Like teach our kids to use the tools that are around them to show the learning that they have, because those are really powerful, and it can be we can do it in a responsible way through our education system. So just don't always rely on the written text, so that is a beautiful thing. We can go beyond, we can do more.
This has really helped illuminate one of the core principles of the New York Consortium schools, which is what both Emerson and Steve were referencing: teacher as guide and teacher as facilitator. Students doing the work and the heavy lifting, and teacher providing the space for that to take place. And I think all of us who are in a classroom, brick and mortar, are grieving and missing that face-to-face interaction in the classroom. And I think now we can acknowledge in a different way that if and when we have the opportunity to be face-to-face with our students and have students facing each other, it's sacred. And how can we really shift what in a classroom period looks like? And how can we, when we are face-to-face with kids, have all of that other stuff be in the virtual world, so that when we're all together, we're collaborating, we're engaging in inquiry, we're debating, and really engaging in critical thinking. Because I think in this time of crisis, not only with what's going on with the murder of Black bodies, but also where we're at in this global pandemic and all the different aspects that relate to who's suffering from the pandemic at this time. We need critical thinkers. We need innovators. We need a citizenry that can come together and agree passionately, disagree passionately, but all have a soul foundation that is driving why we're disagreeing. And I think this really flips how we can leverage distance learning, blended learning, and what we do with each other and for each other when we're in a space together face to face.
We have this vision and mission statement that we said would be enduring. 6,000 plus thinkers and engage, educate, and empower means now more now than ever from my perspective. We're going to need to go back and rethink and re-engage with a definition around thinking and what it means to be engaged, educating, and empowering in 2020 after this, for sure. Another question for folks. What is a caution or a challenge that you would want your colleagues in the community to know about so that we won't make those same mistakes in the future? So what's something that you run up against that's been a challenge or a lesson learned that you would want to caution folks about now and to think about going forward?
I'll say, I think we should all recognize that what we turned on a dime as an organization, and the learning curve was steep, and many people have come so far. If we get as we get into next year, and if we get into a different model of school, I think we should remember that it's not this. We have the tools that we've learned, but now we have time on our side. So we have the ability to plan, we have the ability to think through, we have the ability to design, we have the ability to redesign. And so I would just caution us from thinking it will be more of the same. I think we know we can really do a lot, but we shouldn't be in a fixed mindset that as it is today, it will always be. There's a lot more we can do. There's a lot of different ways to think about this, and we can set ourselves up so that it's even more successful.
Thanks, Zach. Anyone else? A pitfall we should avoid?
I mean, to me, the biggest pitfall, we've always had students who struggle, and it was interesting to me to note that that population shifted a little bit when we changed, and I feel like we picked up some students, and I'm thinking of there's a girl in my Algebra 1 class who was struggling all year, just barely keeping afloat, and since we switched to this format, she suddenly turned into a star student. And in fact, I wrote to her and her mother and her counselor, and I said, I'm going to suggest that she double up next year in math, because this girl can easily do calculus when she gets to senior year. But, since we switched, all of her work is, she's the first one to get her work in. She's very responsive with sending me emails when she has questions. And she just said, I asked her, what's changed for you? Because my videos are good, but they're not that good. And she just said, school was a distraction for me. She's a 9th grader. And she said, there's a lot going on. Now I'm home. My mom's got her eye on me. I've got my schedule. I know what I'm doing this day, this day, this day. And I'm watching a video. I can replay it if I need to. And it just works for her. So I want to capture that. But at the same time, we've also, lost some students. And it's really hard to not, when you can't see them in the hallway and say, hey, what's going on? You haven't been participating. It's hard when we're remote like this to make that connection. You can call home, but it's sometimes just, like seeing that person and the spontaneity of a smile, or like just touching them on the arm or something really has an effect. So that for me is something I'm missing. And I feel like, again, if we're in a blended learning situation, to me, it seems like it's sort of the best of both worlds. I worry about our incoming 9th graders at the high school, because when we made this switch, I already had a rapport with my students, and I could sort of use that to pull them along. I worry about having incoming 9th graders who I don't know and they don't know me. So I think it's going to be really important to have time together, face-to-face time. And I'm hoping that will really, more than anything, help us overcome the sort of like digital gulf where it's sometimes hard to connect with students if they don't want to connect. I think having them in the school some of the time, and also having the opportunity of benefiting from some of the advantages of the things we've been doing, I think that could be a really good blend.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Wow. Someone else wants to share a perspective on a pitfall.
I think I already shared this at the beginning of the meeting when we're introducing the meeting this afternoon. I think hearing from my 7th graders and 8th graders, 2 completely different groups, I would say that not hearing their voices would be something that will be heartbreaking to me. I like the way that they came up. My quietest students are completing work. Students who were not participating in class are completing the work, and I see that complete turnaround. The ways that they've advocated for themselves to find a different way to show their proficiency, I think it's been something that I want to continue moving forward with. And I think we have, as a group, the time to perhaps plan ahead to create different ways to have their students' voices being heard, and also having their knowledge in the matter, in the subject, being presented to us not just written paper and pencil, but perhaps speaking, perhaps dancing, choreography, something that showcases their knowledge. So I think I would dislike to not be able to hear their voices, their own individual voices, like I've been hearing now, and they've been pretty vocal. They're very respectful about it, and they want to move forward. And we create a plan with parents and the students involved as well, and they have a way to showcase what they've been doing in languages.
Thanks for sharing. So we're going to transition to, I call this the lightning round, but it's the inspiring round. And we're going to start with you, Deb, then go to you, Zach, and finish with the two teachers here. Just share with our community, your colleagues, our colleagues, something that will inspire us to be better, even better tomorrow. People have done extraordinary things the last couple of months. It's been hard work because it's hard. Steve mentioned how we had to just pretty much stop on a dime and change everything we do overnight. So folks need to hear from our best people and need to be inspired by you. What would you share with them? I mean, we started this meeting with something that's heavy and oppressive. So folks need to be inspired to grapple with that and to dismantle oppressive systems. And folks need to be inspired to innovate and build a new instructional delivery model because, quite frankly, we need to. So yeah, what would you, I'm trying to filibust here to give you some time to think about that special thing because this is a question that
I'm ready. I'm ready.
But yeah, but you're ready. So Deb, talk to us, inspire us with something.
I think everyone knows that one of the pillars that sustains LACS is that we're not only an alternative school, but a democracy school. And each and every day, students engage in democracy in some way, whether it's in the classroom or whether it's through our all-school meetings, our morning meetings, grappling with proposals, coming up with ideas for what they want to learn and what. Unfortunately, one of the things that fell by the wayside was that engaging democracy process, all voices in a room together and everyone grappling with these issues. And I'm happy to say that the students took the lead and said, we don't want democracy to die here now more than ever. So they got together with their teacher sponsor and they engaged in a protocol. And I just before this meeting came off of a meeting about how we're going to keep democracy alive in the virtual world and how do we vote, how do we inquire, how do we debate. So it can be done and they will do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Zach.
Yeah, so one of the things I think a lot about is, and we've touched on this already, but like as we go back to school in the fall, that may look different. And we started this conversation off talking about sort of the events of the last week and sort of the realities of the world we have to face with. And knowing that our institution has elements in it that oppress our students, that are racist and stop us. So if we're going to be rebuilding, like I'm inspired to be part of a system that can actually rebuild something to address these things. And we have to have those conversations right now about, as we rebuild this, do we need to put in oppressive schedule where if you're late a certain number of times, there's a punitive measure. Like I'm left thinking like there's a lot we can do. We can leverage our technology tools to allow students to learn at their own pace. Allow students who have to be home for portions of the year, perhaps for medical reasons, to on-ramp and off-ramp back into classes. The digitizing curriculum, just really making sure that we're responsive digitally and emotionally and socially to all of our students. I'm excited to be part of that, and I think we can do a lot.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that. Emerson.
I can jump in. So towards the end of the school year, if we were to finish school like regular schooling would be, after final exams, we will have our computer science week with my other Spanish colleague, 8th grade and 7th grade classes. So I think find a way to adapt and be able to implement these computer science projects that are coming up for next school year, perhaps in a digital manner for students to participate in groups will be something, to look forward to. And last couple of years, it's been successful to have this done with the Spanish classes. And I feel like we could use the technology we've curated and the models that we've done to perhaps move forward to computer science. And it's a challenge to adapt it, but I like the challenge. And computer science has been one of the I guess, modes to break some of the barriers we have in the classroom. We have students from many different skill levels choosing to do the most challenging tasks or the most difficult tasks by creating a program or a code to showcase their knowledge on Spanish, their proficiency with Spanish at 7th and 8th grade level. So we're hoping to, adapt this for next school year as well.
For sure. You get the last word today.
I was thinking the other day about an incident when I was growing up, and my mother grew up very poor, and when we were a family, we were not poor. But she had these plates, I guess they were a wedding gift. They were sort of like expensive china. And she used to say, my children are going to eat on china, not like when I grew up. And we appreciated that, but then there were a lot of rules that went with that. Like, don't scrape your knife on the plate, don't chip the plate, make sure you do a good job of cleaning the plate. And one day, my brother dropped his plate by accident and broke it. And no one said it, but around the table, we were all like, thank goodness, because then there weren't enough nice plates for everyone, and we just had to get regular plates. And I kind of feel that way about where we are now. Like I said, I've been teaching for 26 years, and we've pretty much been using the same model with innovations for a long time. And now I feel like everything is on the table. Like, what about state assessments? What about how we give grades? Like Zach was saying, what about the sort of punitive environment that we know doesn't work for some of our students? What about re-examining our curriculum and thinking about not just what are the state standards, but what in this curriculum is something that's useful for our students that's going to engage them? What about differentiating what we're doing now? I was thinking, for instance, what if we had sort of like for courses like Algebra 1, what if we just had a core of videos that anyone can access, you can learn at your own rate, and then we can start thinking about what we do in the classroom, because Deb, you mentioned also, we've now appreciated how important that classroom time is, and what if classroom time is collaboration time, it's differentiation. So I feel energized. I feel like for so long we've been in this structure, and now that structure broke. And part of it is like, well, we want to put it back together again, but I think we also have to think about, okay, but how can we change it now? Because I feel like we've suddenly been given a window and how things could be different. And Zach, like you were saying, now we can control that process a little bit more. We're not reacting. We can be more thoughtful about what we want to change, what we want to keep, how we want to blend these things. So even though this is a hard time for everyone, I also think it's a hopeful time. And I think, as with all challenges, I think ultimately something really good could come from this.
Wow, I couldn't think of a better way to end an amazing session. Steve, I think you're interviewing for the job of superintendent. I would gladly give over the phone for you to now inspire the school. Convocation next year is going to be Steve, everybody. Convocation is going to be Steve. Hey, y'all, I love y'all. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your expertise with me and so many other folks. I'm hoping folks will take the time this week to tune into this session and the recording, because we did record this, and to learn as much as I learned from y'all. So thank you. And thank you for all who joined this afternoon. It was a good session. So
Thank you,
until next time, everyone.
Thank you.
See you,
Thank
friends.
you. Gracias.
Right. Take care.